It is really a privilege to co-sponsor this bill, House Bill 488, along with Representative Slaby. Members of the Rape Crisis Center brought this need to my attention, and I'm thankful that we can create legislation that will assist not only those that are victims of sexual assault, but for all victims of crime. It is important to note that my involvement is on a legislative level. I am so grateful to the Rape Crisis Center across Ohio for the fine work that they do, and it's a privilege to support them with the legislation here today. You know, it's one thing to be in the trenches helping those that are in need, and another to actually have a part in that, as we're here today and explaining what this House Bill 488 is all about. The most modest increase in court costs from $9 to $15 for a misdemeanor and a $30 to $50 for a felony has not been raised since 1998 and will be, as it is now, paid for by the convicted criminal. Also, the newly created Ohio Rape Crisis Trust Fund of $100 charged with either a felony or misdemeanor conviction will be a welcome funding source to offer supportive services to victims of rape and sexual abuse. As stated earlier in the Criminal Justice Committee, 1 in 6 Ohio women experience rape in her lifetime. Today, there are nearly 750,000 adult women living in Ohio who are survivors of rape. The count is even higher when you include men and children. Despite these staggering numbers, far less than half of Ohio's 88 counties are home to rape crisis centers. Several rape crisis programs have closed in the last decade, even as more and more rape survivors have come forward seeking help. By increasing costs paid by sex offenders, we are saving costs for victims. According to experts, each rape costs more than $150,000, as rape survivors are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression, 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol, and 26 times more likely to abuse drugs. Sexual assault survivors also experience reduced income in adulthood as a result of victimization in adolescence, with a lifetime income loss estimated at $241,600. These statistics are all documented. If you'd like to have those documentations, I can certainly give those to you. Crisis intervention and counseling services can decrease the negative effects of sexual assault and expedite the survivor's opportunity to return to work. The modest increase in court cost funding, along with the Ohio Rape Crisis Program Trust Fund, will be able to address several concerns, as the lack of available and centralized information on assistance, the challenges in prosecuting cases, education on awareness and prevention, lack of training, and the limited amount of resources are all in need of funding. These needs are urgent and they are critical. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you House Bill 488, and Representative Slaby, after he says a few words, we will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Baker. It's my honor and privilege to be able to join as the primary sponsor of this bill for a couple different reasons. First of all, as you may or may not know, in one of my former lives, I was Summit County prosecuting attorney for 14 years. One of the most difficult, if not the most difficult case to prosecute would be a rape or sexual abuse type of case. We were fortunate back in the 80s to have a rape crisis center and also to have a victims assistance program. And I can tell you that how much that has helped our victims that were put through double trauma. And I say double trauma because obviously they were traumatized at the time of the offense, but then we as the prosecutor had to put them back through the process, relive that terrible, terrible thing that happened to them, and recount it not only to themselves in their own mind and to the prosecutor, but then to a judge and a jury of their peers. So having a support staff certainly helps them through the process, but also is there to assist them even after the process takes place. So I can't tell you how much that would help an individual that is a victim of this type of sexual assault or rape get through the system, adjust to what they would be put through in the court system, because it's not an easy system to get through, and being cross-examined on the stand is very, very difficult under normal circumstances. And when you have the emotional trauma as well as the physical trauma, we could use all the help we can get, and certainly the victim needs even more help than the prosecution.
Thank you. We would also like to bring up, before we take questions, Center. She is also with the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. Megan, if you would come forward.
Thank you. Good morning. I just want to express my gratitude to Representatives Baker and Slaby for their support of this issue and their passion around how we can increase services for survivors of sexual violence. One day last week, our hotline rang 8 times with calls from 8 different sexual assault survivors. 5 adult women, 1 adult man, and 2 calls regarding children. All 8 callers needed support and information. Some asked where they could find counseling or how to file a police report. One caller simply needed to hear that she was not alone and that the abuse that had occurred more than 20 years ago was not her fault. With more than 100 trained volunteers and 22 employees at the Rape Crisis Center, where we are supported by federal grants and private philanthropy, we in Cleveland are fairly equipped to respond to these calls, to provide support and help to those who really need it in our community. We're the largest independent rape crisis center in Ohio, and as I said, we average 8 calls a day on our hotline. We serve 20,000 people a year through all of our programs, and that's supporting survivors, working on prevention, and creating change in the community. The number of survivors coming to our center has steadily grown over the years. I've been on staff of the center for almost 11 years, and our size has doubled in that time. And as more and more people come forward, we struggle to meet the needs. Across the state of Ohio at the Rape Crisis Center, as we have tried to mobilize our partner organizations, we've seen a very different picture in other communities. We work very closely with a statewide coalition called the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That organization answers very, very different kind of calls. That organization's goal is to build up rape crisis centers around the state so we can have a consistent response for victims when they come forward. And you heard some statistics from Representative Baker about just what the rape needs really are. For example, last week, advocates at the Ohio Alliance answered a call from a survivor in a rural county that needed an advocate in the criminal justice process. The closest rape crisis center was 2 counties away. Another caller, a survivor of childhood sexual abuse in southern Ohio, needed a local hotline number. But the hotline in that area had closed several years ago, and there was nowhere for that person to call. About 1/3 of the calls answered by the Ohio Alliance are from sexual assault survivors calling from an area with no rape crisis services at all. Less than half of Ohio's 88 counties have any type of rape crisis response. And an entire quadrant of the state, in the southeast portion of the state, has no rape crisis programming at all. So given that more than 80% of the clients who come to the center do not choose to participate in any type of prosecution at all, the numbers that we see reported are actually probably much higher than what we see. Our goal here is to really try and build a dedicated stream of support. As our organization has tried to meet with advocates around the state, I've seen executive directors of organizations answering a hotline, trying to write grants, run out of meetings to take care of crisis calls and things like that. So what we really want to do is, through a dedicated stream of funding, really equip rape crisis centers with something that they can count on year to year so we can help them grow and expand. Every child, teenager, adult, woman, and man who suffers horrific trauma like sexual assault deserves to have a safe place to call for help, a safe place to call and be supported with compassion and expertise, and so they can secure hope for a better future. So we believe that every single Ohio resident deserves to have a rape crisis program in their community. So we are very hopeful that this legislation is the start of building something that can help us meet that goal. And by establishing the Ohio Rape Crisis Trust Fund, we can really work together to create a healthier and more vibrant state of Ohio for all survivors. Thank you.
How much money would this raise annually, and how would the money be used?
For the increase goes from 30 to 50 for felons. That can range anywhere from, and what you have to look at, which I guess we can get into what it is that we did in testimony today in criminal justice, is we asked the Legislative Service Commission to run those reports for us, because as I wanted to know what are we doing here. It's great to increase fees, but what does it mean for the victims, and how much can we raise, and all those kind of questions. So we have two reports. One is a report that said, tell me what we are going to be collecting from the fees collected from 9 to 15, and then from 30 to 50. 9 to 15 is the misdemeanor collection, and then the 30 to 50 is the felony. Keeping in mind, as the LSC explained in their report, that usually if you're convicted of a felony, you are going to be incarcerated. So the percentage of those that pay are low. So we took that into account into our numbers, so we are not overestimating what it is that we can anticipate for the centers and for those that are collecting the fees to give to the victims can have. The $50 fee ranges between $9,000 and $11,000 a year. That's at a 10% collection. For the misdemeanors, going from $9 to $15, that is a higher percentage of collection because they're typically not incarcerated. So that, even though the court cost is lower, the percentage is higher. That is around, at 50%, around $1,800. So combined, it's about a $12,000 increase per year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is why we also asked for the $100 set-aside fund to be placed for, specifically for the rape victims themselves. And that ranges from, again, taking it from 10% and 50% for misdemeanor and for felony, $25,000 to $125,000. So that gives a little bit more substance to the bill and is needed, as according as we've heard from Megan O'Brien from the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. Certainly would be a welcome extra funding, and keep in mind that this is all paid for by the convicted offender. So this is not anything else collected but from those. And it hasn't, as we said in testimony this morning, has not been increased since 1998. So we feel that these increases are very modest and does bring a return that will help not only those that are connected with sexual assaults, but also for all victims of crime. Everybody gets a bump. And then besides that, we added the $100 increase for specifically for sexual crimes that brings the, we believe, a pot of money that supports this bill.
You say half the counties in Ohio don't have these centers. Is it because they've never existed, or is it because funding has been rolled back and they've had
I will let Megan answer the question.
I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think it's a really good question. I think first we're dealing with a very marginalized issue to begin with. So it is one that is remains pretty much under the radar and has always been an underfunded issue and a marginalized issue. And then with the economy and things, as well as other types of funding that has been cut, all of that has really impacted organizations' ability to provide these services. So just in the past 3 to 5 years or so, we've seen at least a dozen of these centers completely close. So what we really need is some type of funding that can allow these organizations to build infrastructure and to have something that can be counted on year to year.
And have you seen more people at your center because there's nothing else in other counties, or are more people just simply coming forward?
We have actually, in Cuyahoga County, we have seen people come from as far as like 2 to 3 counties over to come into Cleveland for services. We are working now on an expansion to provide services in Lake and Geauga counties. But Ashtabula County does not have a rape crisis response. Erie County does not have a response. So we've seen people come from far away to just get the services that they need. Thank you.
Do you think these extra costs are going to, well, it
seems like this is gonna give a lot of gratification for victims now, as well as future victims too. Do you think that this is going to help increase more of the reports going through and get these, get these offenders, brought to justice?
My perspective would be that as you provide support services for the victims, especially rape victims, that once that information begins to disseminate out, the more victims that can be assisted, the more the information gets disseminated out, that there are support staffs, if you will, support individuals that are very competent, and it makes them, the report going into the community is you become more and more comfortable. Therefore, I would anticipate that as we fund these groups around the state of Ohio, that that information gets out, that people will be less reluctant not to report and more willing to report because they know that they can have some support services that are going to be available to them, that have been proven to be support services through not only the course of the trial but afterwards.
Any other questions, folks? Well, as we say, seeing none, we will conclude today's press conference. Please feel free to come up to us if you do have a question. You thought of afterwards, that we appreciate you coming here today.